G'day guys, Tills20 here and welcome back to Springfield. In today's episode, we're going to be working in the industrial area of Springfield. This is going to be located on the other side of the river, so we haven't really done much work around this area. This is towards where the nuclear power plant is, and I've also got Duff Stadium is going to be over here. We haven't built that yet, but I've got the main idea where the structure is going to go. We're going to be working in the industrial area because we have a lot of demand for industry at the moment. We've been doing most of the work around the suburbs and around the commercial, but not a huge amount for industry. So I thought that, this would be a good opportunity to do that. Plus, there's a lot of really great references we can put into this build. I'm going to be building one of the most requested things that you guys have been asking for, which is the tire pit or the tire fire, which I find really funny that so many people have been asking for that because it is just a tire fire, but it is like just one of those very, very iconic parts of Springfield that, I do have to get, of course. So, I think episode 8 is probably the best time to do it, and I think the outskirts of the industrial area is probably the most realistic area to place that tire fire. But I did ask you guys last week, or at least a couple of weeks ago, what you'd expect in the industrial area of Springfield, and you guys came up with so many references and so many ideas that I didn't actually consider, so that was really, really helpful, and I tried to incorporate as much as I can, but we are going to be revisiting this area quite a lot because there's just too much to include in one episode. These episodes, by the way, it doesn't feel like I get a lot done, but I spend days working on these videos, just on the builds as well, trying to get all the references, trying to get the builds to be as detailed as I want them to be is taking quite a lot of time, way more time than I ever expected, probably because I'm being very particular about what I am including. So I would like to return to this area and add in extra bits of detail that we did not get done in this episode. And next week, we're not going to be doing an episode of Springfield, but rather I want to work in this industrial area in a live stream where we do a big build and probably focus on more fleshing out this area rather than putting in as much detail as I've been doing in the episodes. So that's the plan moving forward, but you know what? We're not even working on that side just yet. Instead, we're still working towards the downtown, and I'm working on the hospital of Springfield. And this is one of those builds that I have heaps of references for that doesn't change that much as the series has progressed. So I was able to find quite a lot of references, mostly photos that I was working off, but I decided to take my own spin on it and make it a little bit bigger than it is presented within the show, just because I felt like, for it to fit within the context of this version of Springfield, it needed to be a little bit bigger. So I've added in a couple of extra floors, and actually it's pretty much just a couple of extra floors, and the size of it just is a little bit larger than what it was like in the show. I've done that because it just felt way too small otherwise. I tried to make it as many floors as it was presented in the TV show, but it just didn't look very realistic. So I decided to make it a little bit larger, and I quite like this version. I ended up just using procedural objects to merge this building together. It's pretty similar to the style of the hospital, but yeah, just like a little bit different and putting my own spin on it, which I'm pretty happy about. Like I sort of enjoyed taking the essence of that build or of that building and then trying to, create something that was slightly more realistic and something that is still, you can still recognize it. You can still see that it is the hospital from the show, but it is like a little bit different, which I kind of enjoyed doing, like, just doing my own thing. Of course, not everything's going to be like this, but I thought the hospital would make more sense. And because this is a procedural object now, it's not like it wasn't a functional hospital, so I ended up putting in a hospital cube, and I actually put a couple of them in, and what they do is they actually act as hospitals so that this still functions as a hospital, except it was totally custom, which is really fun. And I ended up putting that cube where the emergency entrance is, where the ambulance goes. So you actually will see ambulances use these roads, which is really, really fun. This actually works so well and it feels very functional, which is really nice too. Because as you can tell, I do want this city to be, I don't want it just to be, you know, something we can look at and appreciate. I do want this to be, you know, functional and, you know, working the way that a city should be working. So that's why we're focusing on doing the industrial side of things in today's episodes. I wanted to, you know, just fix up a bit of that demand, and we also needed this hospital because the healthcare within the city was pretty bad. So yeah, this really helps it out. I don't plan to do too many other hospitals. I like this one being the main one. So we will probably just be adding in more of those hospital cubes so that, yeah, so that most people are going to this one in particular. So like I said, I wanted this to look like the hospital from the show, but also make it a little bit more realistic. So I have added in a couple of pathways that lead into the hospital, and I've also added in a little bit more foliage around here, just because the one from the show just doesn't really... There's not like a lot around here, and it's super, super small, which I don't think is very realistic. So I decided to add in some lumps of bushes around here and there, but also leaving it quite open because I quite like the grass setting of where it sits. Like it's raised up on this hill, which I'm pretty sure the one from the show is on a hill, but like I could be wrong, but it sort of looks like the perspectives like that. And I thought that a pathway, like a main entrance going through the middle, that is like totally my own spin on it, but I just thought that that made more sense, and it just gives that a bit more of a realistic vibe too. But something that I did also notice was that there's quite a lot of foliage around here, so a lot of bushes and lots of bigger trees that around the surrounds of the hospital. And I thought, well then, if there's a lot of those sort of trees around here, then maybe there's a park that's going to be surrounding the hospital. So that's what I ended up doing. I ended up putting in a couple of parklands on either side, and there's going to be a pretty big one towards the river, which I thought would be a nice spot to you know, have a bit of green space. This is also something that I noticed from a fan-made map that was created by some fans, I guess, and they also put the hospital on the riverside, which I'm taking ideas from like a lot of fan-made maps. I'm not following them directly, but I'm sort of taking references from them because, you know, if they've put things in locations like that, then they've probably done their research. So it just sort of justifies where I'm also placing my areas as well. So they're quite helpful. But again, this is totally my version of it. This is, you know, you're going to agree with some things and you're going to disagree with some things. And that is just the limitation of, you know, working on a city that changes constantly. There is no version of Springfield that is real. So, you know, I've chosen a city to build that is quite annoying because I'm going to be disappointing a lot of people, and a lot of people are going to disagree with my decisions. But you know what? I can't please everyone with this city. It's really just, we're just going to try and have as much fun as possible. And I'm really enjoying it. But you know what? If I'm going to be making some decisions that you don't agree with, like that's just the nature of this project. And that's why I've been asking for your opinions quite a lot, so I can get the majority sort of rules, so we can sort of get an idea of what the majority of people wants to do. That's why we've been doing a lot of polls as well, so I can get some ideas. But even still, like, they're still quite divided, and I'm trying to read as many comments as possible, but far out, guys. 400 comments on a single video is like quadruple the amounts I'm usually getting, which is super fun, but it is so difficult to read all of them. But I'm actually doing a pretty good job at doing it. But yeah, so basically in a nutshell, I'm trying to take on as much feedback as possible, trying to work with the limitations of the game, and trying my best to get everything to be as accurate as I possibly can. But there is just absolutely no way in hell that I'm going to be able to build this to everyone's standards. So if it is not turning out exactly how you expected, I think that's just the nature of this project. It is not exactly turning out to what I expected either. Some parts are perfect, I really love. Some parts I'm like, I kind of wish that was over there instead of over here. But I think that's just the way that Springfield is. I just think it's just one of those cities that, you know, there is a reason why there's no proper map to it, because they don't know exactly how it all fits together. And that's just my bad for trying to do something that is pretty much impossible to do. So, you know, just take everything I'm doing with a grain of salt and just know that I'm trying to get it to be as accurate as possible within the time frame of a week, which is always pretty tricky to do. These videos take quite a long time to put together. But with all that being said, we are now over on the industrial side, and I first started off by just filling in some general gaps to just get the vibe of the industrial area of Springfield, and then now I'm starting to work on some of the more iconic areas. This place you'd recognize as the box factory. There is an episode where Bart goes here on an excursion and it just has the time of his life.
This room is the most popular part of our tour.
It's just like the other rooms.
Yes, but with one important difference. Oh, we took that out. Yes, it is just like the other rooms.
It's also one of those areas that is like very iconic, even though it's only in, I'm pretty sure, just that one episode. But you know, as soon as I started building in this industrial area, I was like, oh dude, I've got to have the box factory. And when I asked you guys what to build around here, everyone said the box factory. So yeah, pretty fun to build it. I just modified it a little bit. I used one of these vanilla buildings instead of trying to find one that was exactly the same thing on the workshop, or even using procedural objects to, you know, make it look exactly how it should look. But it's pretty close, to be honest. I just changed a couple of bits and pieces. I made sure the dead bushes are at the front, and I also added in this little box sign out just at the front. Not the big one at the top, but just this little box at the very front of it. I just sort of pushed the writing against the wall so you couldn't see it, so you could just see this box. It's not in the show, but I thought it was a pretty fun little part. So yeah, I'm really kind of taking the essence of each episode, the essence of Springfield in this episode, and changing things just slightly just so I can I don't know, add my own flavor to it. But I thought that was a nice little reference using that box. It just sort of fit in really well. And someone also mentioned that Krusty Studios is on the opposite side of the road to the box factory.
That's just a TV studio where they film Krusty the Clown and other non-box related programs. Since it has nothing to do with boxes, I'll just shut these blinds.
So I will also include Krusty Studios at some point over that side. You'll see that I do create a district for that, just so I know that I will be creating it over there. So I was really lucky that there was enough space to place that, because I wasn't really thinking about that when I first created the box factory, and then someone left that comment and I was like, oh, better include that. And yeah, that's it's actually enough space to put it, so I'm pretty lucky about that. Now I'm working on something that I thought about when I first started working in the industrial area. I was like, oh, I better include the pillow factory. This was referenced a couple of times. Barney jetpacks on top of the roof of the pillow factory, and then Luke Perry is also blasted through one of the windows. And I also think I will include the sandpaper factory too, probably like next to the pillar factory, just so that you can see a little bit of the path where Luke Perry goes through. But I thought would be a nice touch is to include the detonator and the barricades, just probably like paying tribute to the destruction. So, you know, maybe I probably could have had a bunch of rubble where it was demolished, but instead I thought, you know, maybe they've set up the detonator, and there's some workers. You'll see I'll place down a couple of oil workers so that there's a bunch of people wandering around this area. So yeah, that was a pretty nice little touch. Of course, there's no detonator in this game, so I thought instead I'd have this curb that I just sort of made into a bit of a curvy type of path, so it sort of feels a little bit like the wires going towards the factory, and just put a barricade where the people are going to be pushing the detonator, and that's pretty much it. It was one of those really easy builds, but I just really thought it came together quite nicely. And of course, that again, the building is very different to the one from the show, but I just wanted to create something a little bit different. It's not one of those ones that you'd, you know, recognize the shape of the building. You know, it's not, I don't need someone to create a custom asset for that. It would just be a bit of a waste of someone's talent. I think I'd rather get them build something that was, you know, iconic enough that we'd recognize. But the Pillar Factory, you know, that's been referenced twice, I think, in The Simpsons, probably a couple more, but you know, I figured we could just do with a regular old factory instead and put a sign on the top, and that's pretty much it. So, you know, we'll be doing that for a lot of things because, you know, we just don't have the resources to do every single building within the show. But I tell you what, the vibe is definitely there, which I'm pretty happy about. Alright, we've moved on. We're now working on the steel mill. This is the Ajax steel mill, which is also known as the gay steel mill.
Listen up! I want all of you to say hello to the Simpsons.
Again, there's only like one reference shot of what this place looks like from the outside. The other shots are all from the inside. But I also wanted this to be as functional as possible because we do actually have a steel mill within the game, and you know, it's a really great asset. I love it. I think it's one of the better unique buildings from the Industries DLC, and I think it's really nice that we actually have a functional steel mill that we're going to try and get resources for so that we can see this thing start producing the resources that we need. So I just thought, you know, let's just use that, and I was like, I wonder how we can add a little bit of gay pride as part of this. So I'll end up putting a couple of flags around here and a couple of flashing lights. I did try to go in at nighttime and add in some like strobe lights and stuff like that, but I just couldn't get it. Like, it just wasn't working very well. So I don't know, maybe this is a place we revisit during the live stream. If you guys have any suggestions to make this just a little bit more of a reference, it would be nice to see some like disco lights flashing around here, but you know, for the time being, we've just got this flashing dance sign and just some pride flags, which I think is just a pretty easy touch to add to this steel mill. You also notice that this is on the outskirts of the city, so this is going to be sort of around Farmington. I wanted Farmington to sort of occupy the area behind the steel mill, and you know, there's also going to be a couple of suburbs around here. I think this is where like Nelson's going to live, and maybe the crazy cat lady, and just like a couple more of those more rundown types of houses. It's not going to be like the best type of neighborhood around here, and I would like, you know, a lot of the bigger types of buildings to be around this area, so that's why we're doing Crusted Studios over here. Even though that would probably maybe be more like a little bit closer to some of the wealthier neighborhoods, I sort of feel like, you know, maybe a movie studio isn't so badly fit around, you know, the industrial area. We will probably have a couple of nicer suburbs on the other side, not on the other side of the river, but further away from the steel mill. But, you know, I sort of thought that, you know, having something like this would be realistically on the outskirts of the city. We've got the highway that leads out of the map as well, and this is also a pretty close area to where the nuclear power plant is, which you know, from looking at as many pictures as possible, it really feels like the nuclear power plant is further out of the city than closer to the downtown. So that's what's around this area. You will be able to get a much better picture of what's around here in the live stream when I do that next week. But this area is definitely the outer skirts of the city. We will still have quite a lot around here, but it's definitely going to feel a little bit more of the outskirts. And I also thought that this would be the best place for the tire fire. So this is just one of those places that is referenced so much within The Simpsons. I don't know whose idea it was to put the tire fire here, but it's just one of those seriously iconic areas. And a lot of people were wondering how I was going to build this, and my idea behind it was to use these garbage piles that's made by Ivania and just build up a lot of the area with these tire props. Now, the problem with this is that the tire props looked really strange altogether, and they absolutely killed my performance, you know, because these are all individual props and they're all circular as well, so placing them all together is just a really bad idea. And then I also wanted there to be particle effects around here with the fire and the smoke, so you know, something that I thought was going to be a really easy build ended up being a little bit more difficult, which is actually sort of the case with everything that I build within this series. I always think it's going to be an easy one, but then, you know, it turns out to be much more difficult than I expected. So this is still me. I decided to keep this footage because I wanted you to see my struggles with this and to see how I tried to build this as best as I could. The particle effects also decreased the frame rate, and just having all these tires together, not only was it bad for the performance, but it also just felt like a really, it felt too busy. It just didn't feel right. So I decided to scratch that idea, and instead I would use the tire props, but just use them a little bit more sparingly on the pile. I also end up changing the color of the tires. I use procedural objects so that I can change the color of them so that they're not so gray but instead black, and that way they blend in with this pile of garbage, which is going to act more like the base of all the tires. So instead of having individual tires all over this, I decided just to place them sparingly on this pile, and instead the fire and the smoke pretty much tell the story of the fire pile, the tire fire I should say. It was also tricky with these particle effects because placing lots at a time, they sort of glitched out when they sort of mixed together. So unfortunately wasn't able to make like a giant fire. I just had to place like a bunch of them sort of sparingly all over the pile, and the smoke I had to sort of push, like put them in like, you know, more particular locations rather than just all over it. And look, I think the end result is it's less busy. It's not as busy as I expected, which is really nice, and the frame rate around here is not as bad as what it was before, which is really great, because the frame rate in this city is pretty alright. And for at least the time being, I am using a lot more detail than I ever have in any of my other series, but I'm trying to concentrate that in particular areas, and then in other areas I'm sort of just doing general filler until we get to those spots. But somebody did call me out the other day, said that they quoted me for what I was saying. It's basically along the lines of I'm trying to keep the frame rate pretty decent, and then I added in 1 trillion props. Yeah, I saw that comment. It hurt because it was true. But you know what can you do? Alright guys, that is it for today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see you all next week for the live stream. I'm really looking forward to it. I want to give a special shout out to some of my patrons: Adam Evans, Justin Newman, Justin Oglesby, Josh Wright, Eric Escobar, and Mark Ma. Thank you all so much for watching, very much appreciated, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!